Welcome, everybody, to the YM&Z podcast. My name is Nicole, the host of the show, and today is Friday, which means we'll meet a new member of the YM&Z community. Today, we have the pleasure of meeting Kelly Brändly. I had the pleasure of meeting Kelly already at her dating rehab workshop earlier on this year in the city. And let me tell you, Kelly knows a thing or two about relationships, the one that you have with yourself, the one that you have with others, and more importantly, and most interestingly, dating. So if you're interested in your love life and in relationships, which are fundamental to your everyday life, you will love hearing from Kelly and this conversation. So please enjoy, without further ado, meeting member Kelly Brändly. Anyway, so officially welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to speak to you today.
Thank you. I'm really excited to get into this with you and see where the conversation takes us.
I mean, ever since your workshop, and do you know that I wish that I had you and your advice and your workshop a year ago, or probably in my 20s, to be honest. I had fortunately or unfortunately done the hard work myself. And so when I had gone to your workshop, I was just like, exactly. I didn't know all that. Like, it was just like, everyone needs this.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
cool.
Exactly. That's one of my dreams. If I could, have an impact, I would love to teach this at schools. Because I have a 12-year-old son and we talk about dating and relationships, of course, all the time. And he's always asking me for advice and what do you think I should do? And I think, it's such a gift that I can give him. And I wish other kids had that benefit of learning these skills when they're growing up, so they don't have to learn it the hard way by making the wrong choices and ending up in the wrong relationships.
I mean, there's so many important life skills that we don't learn in school.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're out of school and we're adulting and we are like, it's like we're just supposed to know things that we've never been taught. And those things are so fundamental to our well-being and our happiness in our lives. And it's like, when were we supposed to even know about these things like attachment styles and what to expect in relationships? And oh my gosh, it's such a topic that I love. And then you just like, it's one thing you can read a book or whatever, but I just feel like some people can bring the message across in a way that hits home different and more efficiently, or just, yeah. And when I heard everything that you said, I was like, fuck, it took me like years of doing this by myself and it could have just been this. So anyway, before we get stuck into what you do, I want to know more about you personally. So how did you, like, whatever you think is relevant, how did you come to be here in Switzerland, and more about your background, and just tell us about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm originally from Canada, from Vancouver. I'm a West Coast girl, and I've been in Zurich 23 years in total, although I was out of Switzerland for 4 years when I lived in Vienna, Austria. And I came to Switzerland for love, as it's either love or work, I think, in most cases, right? So yeah, I met a Swiss guy at university and we moved here after university. And we got on the sort of, career path, and that then ended up taking us to Austria, at which point our lives grew in separate directions. I did have a wonderful child. As I mentioned, he's just turned 12. And so love being a mom. I am also a stepmom now. I have a patchwork family. So post-divorce, if anyone ever follows me, I tell my story, post separation and divorce, I went on 94 first dates, which were horrible, and not horrible in the sense of dating, but this whole process of, I didn't know what I was doing, basically, which in hindsight, I wish I had found what I knew later, much earlier. But that's what catalyzed my whole deep dive into, I need to figure out this relationship stuff, because I keep dating the same people in different bodies, having the same experiences, and this is not what I want. I need to figure this out. And so that's when I decided to start to train to become a coach. I became a matchmaker. Through that, I learned about dating and relationship coaching. I didn't even know it existed before, like it just never crossed my path. And so I got really engrossed in the science of dating and relationships. And that comes from, I was a nurse in a previous life in Canada. I was a nurse. So I have this clinical background. I love science. I love research and all this kind of stuff. And after I started this whole process myself, I ended up going on 2 more dates. And the second one was my very last first date. And I met the most amazing man partner that I have right now. And we've just moved in together. We bought a house, did a huge renovation together. It's been super exciting. I'm just so happy. And now I get to share with everybody the journey that I went on to help them expedite, their process, whether that's post-divorce, which is a lot of the people that I work with, are also people who've been long-term single, can benefit from this as well. And often it's because there's a couple of key areas that they're simply not clear on. One of them being is, who are they and what do they want?
And you're in a prime spot for it, because you will know moving countries has a way of like really shaking up your life. And it was the thing that ultimately started the end of my marriage. It was like, it's the problems were there, but when you move and now all of a sudden your patterns are different, the people are different, you get to start and make every decision new and different, and it either makes you stronger or tears you apart. It has a way of like really shaking up your world, and it can be for better and worse. And I think a lot of people, when they go through something like a divorce, think it's a terrible time. But for me, I think ultimately it's like, wouldn't you rather know? Wouldn't you rather know if you're right for each other and move past it? For me, it was like life-changing in the best way, because of course you never sign on to a marriage and like expect someone to ever leave that person. But it's a relief for you and that person to realize that you're both wrong for each other, because then that person is also free to find who is right for them.
Yeah.
And what I love about what you do is the fact that you're interested in the brain and the science of it all, because the reason that we go for the same type, and by type, I mean, it's not the look that we think we go for. The same type of person is based on our conditioning due to our habits, and it's all linked to the brain and our patterns. And so one has to go with the other. And so when you spoke about it from that point of view, I was like, exactly, because I had looked at my life and my patterns and my type, and it certainly wasn't a look. It was an attachment style, and it was what I knew from my parents and what he knew from his parents. And when you see it like that, when you can look at your relationships objectively, it's mind-blowing. And once you see it, you can turn it around and change the pattern. It just takes someone also to see it, or to help guide you through it. And you did it in a beautiful way. You package it in a beautiful way, and you've learned the language that really hits home for people. So I think you've definitely found your calling. Absolutely. And
Thank
it's
you. I appreciate
for
that.
me, it's like, I don't know if you would have done it if you hadn't gone through your own divorce and then all the dating. What an extreme amount of dating. It must have been a nightmare, Kelly. Like, are there any like experiences you want to talk about?
Well, I mean, yeah, I could tell some funny and some interesting stories, but just to sort of put it in context, because people are always a bit sort of in awe, like, how could you go on this many dates? And I have to say, before I became a coach and matchmaker, I was a headhunter. And so I dated like I interviewed. And so I would arrange on a Saturday 6 dates, 1 hour apart. Right? Like, this is how my brain was working when I started dating. This is really efficient. I can meet lots of men and I can make a good choice, having no clue that this was never going to work. And I was completely in my masculine energy, very goal oriented, these are my questions. I mean, so I was just going through date after date, almost as if the process was the end goal. And there was probably a lot of great men in there that I never was going to see, because I was too focused on, give me the right answers, prove to me that you're the right man for me. And it didn't work. And so that was, yeah, a big learning looking back, and just to kind of, yeah, put people at ease. You don't need to go on nearly 100 dates to find your life partner. Actually, there's some research on it that says on average, people who, once they know what they want, will go on average between 7 and 9 dates before they find their life partner. So that puts a lot of people at ease when you kind of look at it from that perspective. Yeah.
Wow, how exciting. And I can't wait to tell you about my experience, because I think you'll find it maybe unique, maybe not, because you would know, you're in the space. But I think it's so interesting how our life experience accumulates to something, and you couldn't have done it without it. If you weren't a headhunter professionally, how would you be able to put your dating and matching together? That is like headhunting partners for people. How
Exactly.
amazing. I love it when you gather all these little experiences in your life to form something really unique that is so you. And I think it's so fascinating, and it's like all worked in your favor, because now it's like you're definitely in the right spot.
Definitely. And it reminds me, there's this quote I've always resonated with. It's from a Canadian band called Semisonic, and they have this song, and it says, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." And that's always been this motto that I've had. And it's so true, right? Something has to end for you to start something new, whether that is perhaps a relationship that isn't healthy or serving you, or a career. We have to let go of things to move forward in life. And people like to hold on, and they like to hold on way too long.
Yes.
And the better we can get at just letting go of things that don't serve us, we can open up opportunities to create some really amazing things in our life.
And to even let go of people, like, because life is long, and people maybe from when you're little, and you feel like it's bad or defeated if those people go out of your life. So you kind of keep together even if you've grown apart, and whether that's a partner or a friend. And divorce is something that has a way of like clearing out some people in your life. And initially it's a hard exit of people in your life. But for me, it was like, in a way, it was terrible. And also, it had to make space for the people that were right for me now and who I was to be now. And if you have that scarcity mindset of people in your life and you cling on, what I find is that you tend to then stay the same person so that you can keep them, and you start living a life that's inauthentic to you, because you're just trying to keep on holding on to those people, even if you've outgrown them, simply because you have changed as a person. And so when you keep these relationships that are no longer for you because you've changed and they've changed, it just keeps you small. It keeps you from growing. And then it also prevents you from having the space and the mental space and the physical space for people who are right for you. And so divorce really clears out the cupboard. And it works both ways, because whoever's not right for you, you're not right for them. And I know what it did for me is it cleared out a lot of space for people. And now it's like the difference is incredible, because now the people in my life now are meant for me, for the person that I am today. And there's nothing I regret about that. If anything, it's like you can look at it as though it was a terrible thing to happen, but also what's come of it is incredible. So I don't know if you experienced that in your divorce, but sure, that was a rude awakening for me at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the key sort of concepts that I teach people is this idea of compatibility. And compatibility isn't just in romantic relationships. We have compatibility with friendships, with colleagues, bosses and things. And there needs to be this underlying shared values. And certainly a lot of people, when we look at romantic relationships, stay in relationships where they don't have those shared values, and they have to compromise part of themselves to be in that relationship. And exactly that, when things end and you're able to then come back to yourself and reconnect with those values and live your true authentic self, you feel much more whole, you feel much more fulfilled. And so I think you're absolutely right. And I teach a lot of metaphors. You probably noticed this from the workshop. I love to talk in pictures and help people sort of relate to this. And I think our life is like a train journey, right? And at different stops, people get on our train, and at different stops, people get off our train. And when we think of it this way, if somebody's got their path and all of a sudden our train takes, a different path than they're on, it makes sense that they get off the train and they go, this isn't where I'm going anymore. I need to get on a different train. Mm-hmm. And I see this as so much more of a flow. It's not negative that somebody gets off our train. It just means that we're on different paths now. And that's okay. And when a marriage ends, sometimes it's not because there's this, negative, toxic, damaging relationship. It's simply because our train paths have diverged and now we're going in different directions, and we can be okay with that, and we can embrace, the next part of our journey and the new people that are going to come into our life as a result of that.
Yeah, especially because for me, it was never about getting divorced because I stopped loving this person, because it's almost like a family member. When you've decided to marry someone, you did love them. They were the right person for you. There's no shame. And a lot of people will hang on to a marriage because of the shame of it ending, when really both things can be true. That person was right for you, and now they're not anymore, and you can leave them with love and it be over. And those things can be true, that it cannot be a right person for you anymore, but that they once were. And we like to live in a world, or people like to live in a world, where there's rules and everything is binary. And unfortunately, society has, for me, the model of marriage has changed for the worse, where it's valued for its longevity and not its quality. And it's even been gamified in a way. If you look at like how every year that passes, you get a new, what is it, metal, it's cotton, it's paper, it's silver, it's gold. And so it's gamified. It's like however many years that pass by, that is success. And no one discusses about what it feels like. I was with my partner for 13 years, and everyone is like, but you can't start over, because then that is a waste. Like, you're starting over. And it's like, well, it's not a race. No one's going to give me a medal after 50 years, or they will, but that's all I'll have, is this weird physical gold medal. And it's like, but how did my life feel to me?
You're right.
And sometimes we compromise our values and the quality of life just because of this weird gamified version of what marriage has become. And it's a shame. It's a shame, because it doesn't need to be like that. And just like a marriage, just like you were saying with friends, we don't, none of us have defined the terms, and none of us know when to leave, because then it's like the shame of not having a friend, when really, even in relationships, when you go on a date, you kind of have terms. Like, now you're serious. What does that mean? When you're committed and you don't sleep with other people. But friends, you don't have these exchanging of expectations. It's so fascinating, these relationships. And I feel like the models can change, and they can be open-minded. And as you say, the flow of, just like emotions, letting people in and then letting go if it's not right, or if it's no longer serving both people. It's a fascinating thing. And I think relationships in general need to be changed, or the models need to be more varied, I guess. There's so many versions of relationships too. Absolutely. And dating, I guess, is like that as well. I'm sure you see more modern relationships.
Yeah, when we look at, marriage in the traditional sense, there was a lot of dependency that led to the marriage, right? I mean, when we look at the traditional gender roles of the man going to work and the woman being in the home and raising the children, there was that dependency. And with, today's modern world and men and women and equality and working, we don't have that built-in structural need for that dependency. And so we're looking at relationships from a very different perspective today. It's not survival based anymore. It's much more about self-actualization, fulfillment, growth, living our best life. And so we have to change the way we see relationships as a result of that. And I love the work of a guy called Stan Tatkin. He does a lot of work on relationships. And he says one of the biggest mistakes that we make in today's modern relationships is we assume things and we think we're family. We think that there's given rules that, 50 years ago played out. In today's modern relationships, they don't play out that way because we have a different way of working. And so when we create relationships today, we actually need to create our rules of engagement as strangers, like we would a business, and say, this is how we function as a couple. This is what's important to us. These are the standards we hold each other to, because it's good for you, it's good for me, it's good for the couple. And it's not anymore just based on, we did this because of tradition, because our families did this, we have to do the same. We need to get much more experienced and better at communicating as adults to create relationships that serve us in our modern world, basically.
Yeah.
And this is one of the things I see when people come to me, post-divorce, and they tell me about some of the challenges they have. It's often that there was assumptions that were never clarified, they were never discussed. And we've got all kinds of different relationship forms today where, people come together from different cultures, different countries, different religions, different views on things like monogamy. And if we don't clarify these with our partners, it just leads to, misunderstandings, hurt feelings, all this kind of stuff. And that's one of the big areas that I help people learn is, how do you communicate? How do you get the language that you need to talk to your partner in a way that they understand? And that can also bring you guys forward as a couple.
It's so true. And the language thing is, what's really special to me is that I know a couple of cases of people who are great partners and they speak different languages, which has just meant that they've had to focus better to communicate effectively. Whereas if you speak the same language, like let's say for English, for example, it's like you assume you're on the same page because you speak the same language. But speaking the same language is more than just a vocal thing. It's like we all grew up with our parents in mind of how a relationship plays out. And we just assume, we have these expectations that it's going to be carried out a similar way. And living in an international city like Zurich has really exposed to me just how different everybody lives their lives. And it's not wrong. Everyone's from different countries. So of course it's natural that their experiences are different. So it makes total sense that to be in a relationship with someone, they've lived a whole different life with different expectations. So you really have to be, first of all, clear on yours. So I think it's really important, and I don't know if you agree, but I feel like a partnership is right when two people have done or are doing the work to better understand themselves in order to find a partner right for them. And they have to be clear on what their boundaries are, because otherwise that's when people get triggered and upset, and these miscommunications, because they absolutely have no idea why they're upset, because they're not clear on their boundaries. Especially for people like me, who I was like a people pleaser of note. So I would just have none. And the next thing I know, I'm completely like depleted of energy, and I'm like upset that I'm not getting any love back. But it's because I'm just like love bombing. And that's not, I've never said I need it back or what I need back. And then it's like there's this resentment when you've never set the terms. And also as a partnership, just to have a plan, like a business. And most people don't want to look at it like that because they think it's unromantic. But what could be more romantic than to sit down with another human being and have a plan on like how your partnership is going to play out? What are your goals? Exactly. I think that's totally romantic. And people want to play it out like a romantic comedy. And it's just so flawed. It's so flawed. As someone who's done it and seen that that's not the way, like it doesn't equal happiness. Yeah. To have a plan is the most romantic thing. It's like two people are building together a project that is their relationship.
I so agree. We've been, I blame Hollywood for a lot. We've been brainwashed by Hollywood of this sort of, we meet, we kiss, we fall in love, we live happily ever after. And, it doesn't work like that in life. we need to, and this is where I love this idea of stay strangers, because I always tell people we need to stay curious about our partner. We need to continually be asking questions to make sure that we're constantly, coming back together. Healthy relationships are interdependent. It's like the DNA helix, right? So there's points of connection, there's points you go apart. You've got your individuality, but you come back together as a couple. And you need to stay in dialogue with each other to reconnect on those points. And I love the idea. I always teach people that you should have an annual relationship weekend. And I give people tools for how do you structure that weekend? What do you talk about? How do you create your vision for your relationship? What are you guys going to achieve as a couple in the next year? You check in on, these are our ways that we want to relate to each other, the things that we commit to each other. So it's not just we commit to be in a relationship, but we commit to having each other's back. We commit to, showing each other love in these ways. And you need to check in on those things on a regular basis, like you would on a business, to make sure they're still relevant. Otherwise, if you don't, that's how couples grow apart. If you don't do the investment in your relationship, you're not going to get the returns.
And that's why the old model is so flawed, is because I don't know what everyone else learned, but what I learned is that you get married and then it's happily ever after and you never discuss it again. Yeah. Those are the terms at the wedding. Your vows are the terms, and you both understand it on the day, and it's this vague idea of, okay, now I'm committed to this person only for the rest of my life. Cool. You never discuss anything further than that. And then from that moment on, it's just never discussed. And it's like, I'm with you, hitched for life, but we don't understand where we're going. We don't know the goals. We don't talk about it. We just assume whatever I do, there you are, and vice versa. Yeah. And then over years, of course, it's like no plan. And no plan is a plan to fuck it up big time.
Yeah. And like you said, why are we not taught these things in school? This is, for me, the biggest missed opportunity to create better societies and happier people and better functioning relationships. But nobody teaches us the importance of these interpersonal skills. And I think it's so sad. And I wish, that I had the opportunity, maybe one day I will be able to do this, because I think it is so important that we learn these things and we change our mindset as a society about, if we need to work at it, it's not worth it. Like, whoever said that? Like, was anything in life that we didn't have to work for really that great? As people, we love, to have something where, not to say that a relationship has to be this mountain of climbing, a challenge, but when we achieve something through putting in work, it makes us feel great as people. And I think the same thing in a relationship, when we work at it and we're constantly looking, how do we improve? Like, this is good, but we could still be better. When we can do that, we feel passionate about our relationships and our partners, and the love grows.
And there's such joy in the process. Like, people think work equals bad. You know what I mean? And for me, it's like, even work on yourself. Like, I find it interesting and fascinating to investigate myself. When you spoke about the attachment styles, for example, it's like, it's not work that is like homework. It's not like work that is, I sit in an office and whatever. It's fascinating to understand yourself, and it makes the process of life meaningful, exciting, happy, like really. And the link to relationships and our well-being has been proven scientifically. You will have known how many studies. And good relationships in your life are the difference between a life well-lived and healthy life versus unhealthy, depressed. And it's amazing that people know that they're unhappy, depressed, they're suffering from health conditions. And this, for me, there's no coincidence. From COVID meant that we had to distance ourselves. And we were the most unhealthy collectively we've ever been.
Yeah.
And not enough people have put two and two together. If that wasn't a huge sign from the universe, like, guys, we're going to take this away from you so that you can see the value of human connection.
Yeah.
And it just amazes me that not enough people have put these two together. And I just know that healthy relationships changed my life because, you know, I'm not saying that I was right, but, you know, my marriage ended because I cheated. I had an affair. And I did it because I met another human being that I actually felt a human connection to. For the first time in years, in a decade or more, I'd met another human being, and we had just a not even a physical exchange, but an exchange that this person saw me and I saw them as a human being, and we connected. And that felt like life giving. It breathed life into me. It was like someone did CPR and I didn't even know I needed it. And even though, you know, whatever, there's lots of details about why people cheat or whatever, but when you have felt that connection and it breathes life into you, you see like in a very physical way what connecting to another human being can do for you. And there's not enough talk about how important that is. Physically, your well-being, everything. It's all interconnected. Relationships are the most undervalued, underappreciated things. Healthy relationships in a person's life.
Yeah, and they're the foundation of everything in our lives. It's, you know, people think relationships and they think, oh, that's just my private life and I've got this other work life. I'm like, no, we have one life. Like, you know, we can't subdivide it into all these things because relationships underlie everything. You know, how we relate to our colleagues, those are relationships. Our siblings, our parents, our neighbors, relationships are everywhere. And when we look at relationships, I mean, I always say people come, you know, to me to work on the romantic relationships. I said, it's going to impact every relationship you have because you're going to start to see yourself differently. And as a result of that, you're going to relate to people differently. And so everything's going to start shifting. And COVID exactly shone that light on how much we've neglected this foundation. And when we've got structural problems in a foundation, we know, you know, things are eventually going to collapse on us. And we need to wake up to saying, we got to get the relationships right. And the other stuff becomes easier.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I was speaking to a friend from YM&Z last night, and she was saying that I said, how's your job going? And she said, you know what, I hate that it's not the job, it's the colleagues I love. So then I can do the job forever. I love going to work for the colleagues. And COVID was supposed to, for me, it was like the universe saying, fix the relationship with yourself. Let's isolate you so you have a hard look at yourself, because that's where relationship starts. If you can fix the relationship with yourself, you will be able to realize how much you're projecting onto everyone else and what you're projecting. And when you can sort out the relationship with yourself, first of all, you don't take everything so personally. It just changes and elevates your life experience. And then you realize everything in your day is better because you have a better relationship with yourself. And then you have better relationships with people, and it changes the game. There's not enough emphasis on this, which is why I think what you're doing is like just, it absolutely should be taught in schools. Absolutely.
Yeah, if I can, I'd love to just circle back about this attachment style. So we've mentioned it a couple of times, but a lot of people have never even heard of it and don't realize how much of a game changer this can be in realizing why patterns repeat in your life, why you keep, like you said, dating the same person, not physically, but in terms of this. And the thing about attachment styles, it comes from our childhood. It comes of how we learn to relate to people, our primary caregivers, usually our parents. And that's how we learn how to relate to men and women, you know, based on that kind of connection. And 50% of us roughly grow up in homes where we get our physical and emotional needs met consistently, and we grow up being what we call securely attached. But the other 50% of the population, for whatever reason, grow up what we call insecurely attached. And insecure attachment shows up in two different ways. So one is anxiety inducing and the other is avoiding. And, you know, if you fall into this 50%, you'll see patterns in your life where, you know, relationships or connection cause you anxiety, or you feel like you just can't cope with it and you need to pull away and avoid. Maybe you're somebody who's afraid of, you know, sharing vulnerability, or you feel suffocated in relationships as soon as it starts to get intense. And recognizing these things should be an indication that there's something that you can do to actually improve your relationships. Because when you start to understand that these are just learned patterns and behaviors, they're beliefs we take away from our childhood, but we get to change those as adults, right? As children, we're reliant on our parents for our survival. So their opinion and how they relate to us is super key. As adults, we get to rely on ourselves. We're no longer dependent on these relationships. But if we haven't questioned what we were taught in those beliefs, we keep repeating the same patterns. And that's the biggest sort of aha moment for people when they realize, wait a second, this isn't a fixed part of me. This is something that if I look at it, I describe it like you take it out of the back part of your brain